Welcome to the Redbird Report, your destination for the latest on the St. Louis Cardinals. Here are your hosts, BK and T-Bone.
Welcome back to the Redbird Report alongside Tanner Hendricks, and I'm Brandon Kiley. We have a third individual in with us today. It is the Cardinals Assistant General Manager, Rob Surfolio, joining us in studio. We appreciate him for doing so. Rob, thanks for coming in by, man. How you doing today?
Fired up to be here. Easy drive over. I got to go with the T-Bone and BK reference given the intro, so hope that's okay. We go straight to nickname first.
I love it. So do we call you Surf? Is it Rob? Is it Cerfolio? What's the go-to on your end?
The Surf nickname is starting to catch some steam. That's if you were to ask anybody, like, who's Rob? And you're like, oh, Surf, yeah. Usually the Surf nickname is what we go with. Yeah.
Full disclosure, I asked Ollie about what we should ask you whenever you come on today,
okay,
and he called you Surf as well. So I was like, okay, this is the thing inside of the organization for sure.
Correct.
All right,
Correct.
So let's get right into this. You have moved your entire family here to St. Louis.
Yep.
I would imagine that was a process in and of itself. Now that you have had, 3, 4, 5 months to get settled in, what is it like for you to be a part of the Cardinals organization, living in St. Louis during the baseball season? What's this transition been like for you?
It's been awesome. It's been a lot. It's been incredible highs, incredible lows. And I say that, I met my wife in Cleveland where we were the last 10 years. And my wife, when we moved here in January, was 6 months pregnant.
Oh my!
So we had our second child at the end of April. So just a lot of new things happening at once. But in terms of the professional side of it, it's been pretty awesome. And it speaks to the great people we have across the organization, whether that's, things that are going on right now with the organization collaborating in preparation for the draft, or getting into the dog days of the summer and just continuing to try and keep guys focused on getting better, where it's in the big leagues, minor leagues, wherever. We have a lot of great people here. We've been able to hire some other great people that have been really excited to work with and learn from. And it's been a real treat, despite at times being challenging with a newborn and trying to do that in season and make sure my wife doesn't, kick me out of the house every now and then.
I've got to ask a follow-up question. T-Bone does not have kids. I've got one, okay. 2 years old at home. He'll turn 2 here in a couple of weeks.
Love it.
So what are the overnights like for you? Who's taking those? Who's in charge of that? I would assume your wife is taking the lead on all of this. She's a saint.
My wife is taking the lead in multiple facets of our life, thankfully. So I have a two-year-old son coming up on 2.5, and now a 2-month-old daughter. We are on a 4-night sleep 7 hours in a row streak right now. So
dude, congratulations.
Heavy knock on wood. Things are trending positively for our sleep.
We got to a
quality.
year, and that was our first time sleeping through the night. It was amazing.
Yeah. Well,
that first time, my wife was like, I feel like a different human being right now.
It really goes a long way. I hope if you guys end up having a second one, I hope that goes a little bit better for you guys.
Fingers crossed.
She does most of the work, like most things, and I'm incredibly lucky to ride her coattails in a lot of different ways. So.
Well, Rob, you mentioned, coming over here to St. Louis and everything new all at once. I remember the first press conference at the end of the season, and the main focus was, hey, we've got to redo our minor leagues, right? We've got to go in and make it more modern, make this new approach. Sounded like it was going to be a difficult task when Mo was talking about it in the offseason. What was it like when you got here? Was it okay, well, we have a lot of work to do? Is it okay, this isn't as far behind as they seem to think it might be? What was that process like when you first got here to St. Louis?
Really the process was just that, of trying to understand that question, because, the way that this works on our side of things as a baseball employee is you're with the team. I was with the Guardians for 10 years. And then all of a sudden a phone call comes and, hey, this other team is interested in interviewing you for X position. And you really only have a 7 to 10 day window to go through the whole just vetting process. And they're vetting you. You're vetting the organization, and just trying to, I didn't know a lot of people that were here. So for me, when I first started, it was try and build foundational relationships, trust. And the big questions I kept coming back to was, there's a lot of banners flying at Busch Stadium, and that's not by luck. So what allowed this organization to get there, to achieve that? What are the things that they've done well for a long time that should never change? Staples of the organization. And there's so many people I give shout outs to, whether it's major league staff, whether it's minor league staff that have been here for a long time, whether it's people not even in the coaching or player development or performance realm, just, resources in the organization that were incredibly open-armed for me to try and understand that question. And then I brought, my 1 or 2 cents from Cleveland. And really when we were hiring people to come be a part of this thing, because that was the task, was to help build out the team. Wanted to be really intentional with the organizations that we tapped into across the industry. It's, all 30 teams are trying to solve the same problem, but if all 3 of us were to show our math work, how we got to that answer is really different. It kind of depends on the constraints, the type of people that each organization has, and then they self-organize towards trying to solve that problem. So, bringing in people from other successful organizations that, again, we're trying to solve the same problems that people here in St. Louis were, that I was doing in Cleveland. And how'd you go about that? Like, what was your process for pitching development? What were the things that you guys tracked that you made top of mind for your player plans? So I think just by bringing in a lot of other smart people, hopefully people a hell of a lot smarter than me, hope I can say that
You're good.
Here. You can just get people in a room to help solve a problem with a group brain that's better than any one individual brain. So it was very similar to those questions that you outlined, trying to get like a high level understanding of what that looks like as a St. Louis Cardinal, and then to over time grow, adapt, and evolve that by way of injecting new ideas from other successful organizations.
You mentioned the staffing that you've put into place, and there's been a lot of talk about the feedback loop that is now in place for especially the minor league side of things, the pitching, everything like that. Let's start with the staffing. From where you guys were when you were hired to where you are today, what do you feel like that new staffing has done to help the development process on the minor league side of things?
Yeah, so I think a couple big things that probably are going to sound really simple, but to do them at scale for major league players all the way down to players in rookie ball is actually really hard, because you're essentially trying to coordinate high level process across 400 people. And that's including your players and your coaching staff. And so I think with that new staff, and again, even the old staff, like talked about the major league staff involvement in this process in the off season, which I give them a ton of credit for, because a lot of major league coaching staff, when it's the off season, it's like, this is my off season. We just grinded for months. I want to take some time with my family. But in this case, our major league staff was incredibly involved in not only just the hiring, but this part of it of who are we going to be about? Like, let's work backwards from what does great major league performance look like? We're lucky in our sport that we can quantify that in a lot of different ways that other sports just cannot. So whether it's how pitchers, hitters are moving on the mound, in the batter's box, whether it's like the performance side of it, it's how the ball moves, how the bat moves. Like, there's a lot of things we can quantify. So it's like, let's understand what those things are and work backwards from that, and then build really detailed player plans that are holistic in the sense of they are pushing guys to develop specific baseball skill, but it's also in conjunction with the things they need to do to be a better athlete, whether that's strength, power, movement efficiency, nutrition, sleep, mental performance. There's these supporting domains that have to work in concert with what we're trying to accomplish on field. So you can't write a really great player plan if you don't know what you're working backwards from at the major league level. What are the characteristics that drive success for hitting, pitching, infield, outfield, catching success? Let's be crystal clear on what those things are. This new group that you alluded to, like, that was some of our first projects as a new team, was to really dig into that, try and have an elite level understanding of that, and then build a scalable, objective player plan system that we could execute at a high level at scale. And like I said, that sounds probably a lot easier than it actually is to pull off. But I think our group, especially the new group that's come in, and just how they've tried to learn the same things we talked about, what worked well, and then bringing in their own ideas to make that machine spin.
As a quick follow-up on that, so you're talking about working backwards. So like you look at what works at the major league level, but there are different guys that can go about it differently, right? Like,
Absolutely.
you look in your own system. JJ Weatherholt is very different than like what Nolan Gorman was as a prospect. They can play similar positions on the infield, but they're very different in how they go about it.
Correct.
So are you looking for like, okay, we have, let's just use Nolan Gorman as an example because Cardinals fans will know what that looks like. A power hitting lefty that is a middle infielder. When that is successful at the major league level, what does that look like?
Yep.
And then you build a plan from there. So you're almost like doing a player comp, and then you work back from that player to find out how was that guy successful. Is that what it looks like? Or if not, what is that process?
A little bit. Pretty similar to that. So we work backwards. Like, here are the things that across the entire sample size of major league players over the last 10 years, here are the skills and attributes that tend to show up the most. Even look at like a Mike Trout, when he was at his best, he didn't do all 10 of those things at an elite level. He probably did 8 or 9 of them at an elite level. And the average guy, or the average major league player that's a good player, does 5+. I'm just throwing out random numbers.
Sure.
So not every player gets to performance in the same way. That's where you have to have a process at scale that then is, when you zoom in at the individual player level, it's individualized. So you talk about 2 players there that get to offensive impact in a very different way. Nolan Gorman, much more through slug, a little bit higher swing and miss. We've been trying to find the right balance of that with him throughout the year, of when he's at his best, like what's his superpower? We want to know all of our players' superpowers. For him, it's impacting the baseball at good angles, which relates in slug. And expected slug and expected WOBA, all these things. And then there's other parts of the game that we want to bias his training towards, so that we're kind of amplifying his superpower. Whereas JJ, not as much slug, a little bit lower of a bat speed guy, but has elite level zone control and contact skills. And so what can we do around those 2 things? So we never lose his superpowers, but we're always like raising the floor on the other items that are going to contribute to him hopefully being an awesome major league player for us. So that's the science and the art, I think, of trying to run this process at scale, but then within like the localized player level, it is individualized, and there's no crystal ball math equation that if you do this, then this will happen. You're kind of making your most informed hypothesis based on the room of experts that you have.
And how often, or how many like plate appearances, for example, like you talk about coming up with this plan, finding their superpower, how many plate appearances in the minor leagues, or is it not even plate appearances, just conversations, does it take to maybe then say, okay, maybe this plan isn't working, we shift towards this, or okay, this plan really worked, now we might be able to see if this guy can take a step when we move him to another level, for example?
Yeah, that definitely falls in the art part, I think. There's some 100 plate appearance, 150 plate appearance, we feel this signal might be real. But I honestly think one of the most fun parts of just doing this in season is being humble enough as a group to come back to the drawing boards. And you know what? Here's the idea we had in spring training. Here's what we thought was the most impactful thing to work on with this player. And you know what? Like, we're seeing real evidence to suggest that we should go in a different direction. And I couldn't count on all of our hands combined how many times I've had to do that in my career. But I think, again, that's why you want to have smart people and evidence-based feedback loops that allow you to get to those things fast. So you don't wait for bad performance for 2 months. You catch that after 2 weeks of some like lagging or leading indicators before the lagging indicators fall off the table.
All right, so you mentioned feedback loop. That has become a trigger word for the Cardinals, and not in a bad way. Just it's something that you guys are mentioning a lot. Ollie specifically has mentioned that a lot when talking about guys that are either coming up or guys that are going back down as well. The action plan that is in place for guys and what they need to do to continue to improve. Talk me through that. Talk me through, like, okay, today or yesterday, you guys had somebody go down, right? Or a couple of days ago, you have somebody go down. What is that process like in place for your team, where you're getting ready to go talk to this individual? It's obviously not a great day for them. They're not enjoying having to go drive a few hours to Memphis before they can hopefully get that next opportunity. But what's that like? Tell me what that process is to put in the action plan for that player.
Sure. I mean, we can just use our recent player, and I think Gordon wouldn't mind if we talked about this here. And So we can use Graceffo, who's been up a couple times. And this process works a little bit different in terms of the steps that happen, but the outcome's the same for a position player or a pitcher. In this case, we'll talk about Gordon. He's come up a couple times. We obviously have a player plan for him that is being worked on, whether it's here or in the minor leagues. And it's really just like a handoff. And I think that's one of the beautiful parts of my role being based here is I'm able to actually like be in the clubhouse with the guy when he shows up and have some of those conversations, in this case with Dusty and his team and Ollie and Scals and the whole group. But when the player goes down, like when they come up, it's a little bit easier.
Sure.
Pretty excited to be there. We give the debrief to the coaching staff that's then going to execute the training session with the player. Like, here's the things we've been working on the pitching side: delivery, movement profiles, performance focus, execution patterns, whatever it is for a pitcher. Same thing on the performance side. Our strength and conditioning group, our director of performance, kind of trade off notes with the guys in the major league clubhouse. And hopefully the player just feels like he's in a different location, but he's working towards the exact same things and everyone's dialed in on what those are. On the way down, it's the exact same. I end up playing a big broker in that process of collecting the information that we saw up in the major leagues. Sometimes that information is exactly what we would have expected, and there's no change with the player. Sometimes, I think one of the stories with Gordon where we saw like some velocity fall off, and we're able to just use the information on the biomechanics level of how was he moving when he was at his worst versus at his best. And then we partner with the player. I think that's really the big thing, is just no secrets, transparency directly with our players. We would sit down with them just like the three of us are sitting down right now, and we'd be really friggin' honest about here's what's working well, and here's the opportunities we have to get you back up there. And then we build a plan together. And obviously, like the staff side of it comes ready with ideas, and we want the players a voice and just for their buy-in motivation to be a huge part of that. So I think that's some of like the actual behind the scenes flow of action, but it's been really fun, and our players have just responded really well to that. It's obviously not fun being sent down from the major leagues back to the minor leagues when you're either on a private charter or you're on a 10-hour bus ride. Those are a lot different modalities of travel.
The salary is slightly different between the two as well.
Correct. But our guys have done a really good job of, okay, what do I need to do to get better? And our staff, has been really great at handling that, both major league and minor league.
And you keep mentioning, you mentioned it there on what that process is when guys are up and how it's kind of a handoff to the major league staff. And you've mentioned a couple of times now your conversations with Ollie, Dusty, Brant Brown, the hitting coach for the Cardinals.
Yep.
How often are you in communication with the major league staff? Is that a daily basis, or is it just every time there's a roster move? How involved are you with the major league staff?
I mean, I'm in there every day. If they were here, they'd probably be like, "You're in there way too much, buddy." But no, I think again, that's just one of the beautiful parts of how, going back to Chaim and Mo's vision for this organizational change, right? Previously there was only a farm director, and we have a farm director, and I'm here as an assistant GM trying to bring player development is not just a minor league thing. Player development performance, that is every player in our organization, whether you've won 5 Cy Young Awards or 3 MVPs, or you've been in the organization for 8 minutes. The methodology is the same. What you're focused on might be a lot different for a player like a Nolan Gorman versus a 17-year-old in rookie ball. But the actual math problem and the tools you're using to answer those questions are the same. So that's been awesome for me, just to be with these guys here every home game, to be able to just help support them with the work that we're doing with our major league players. And then obviously some of these transition moments are maybe a little bit more involved, or we're going to have a formal meeting or sit down about this player. And if we're doing something in the major leagues, it's probably more ad hoc, one-off. But I think for me, that's been really awesome, just to be able to bring some of the initiatives to life that we set out to try and accomplish back in the fall.
We've talked about Gorman a decent amount here, or referenced him at least. Walker could fit into this bucket. At one time, Burleson could fit into this bucket as well. There have been times this year where, because of the numbers, you have a player that ends up kind of getting put to the side for a bit, and they're getting their work behind the scenes. They're going down to the cages, and that's where they're seeing their opportunities for development.
Yep.
And Gorman, it appears, has used that development opportunity to thrive again. And Burleson certainly, there's no doubt about it, used that opportunity to thrive again at the major league level. When you guys are going through that process, because on the outside, fans can't see that, right? Like we can see what it looks like when a player, I can see what it looks like when a guy either succeeds or fails at the major league level in the lineup night to night. When you guys have that player behind the scenes, how are you able to determine, all right, what we are doing is working? We are getting closer with this player. What is that process like?
Yeah. So this is why you can't just use the numbers that are on the scoreboard at 7:00. And to the process that I, referenced of like, who are we going to be about? What are the skills? Working backwards from those things that the most productive players consistently showcase at the highest level. And we're going to build all of our player plans towards those things. So you talk about a Burleson, I used the superpower note earlier. What is his superpower? He is an elite contact player that can impact the baseball. There's not many of those guys that can do both of those things really well. And when it goes wrong for him, he's swinging at pitches all over the zone and just not getting in opportunistic counts or swinging at the parts of the zone where he does the most damage. And so it's the same thing that we would do with a rookie ball player. It's Burley, here's when you're at your best. Here's what we're seeing from either how your swing is working. Like for him, it was less about the mechanics of the swing versus like maybe a Gorman or a Donnie, like, hey, Donnie, when your bat speeds are here, here's what's happening versus when they're not. And here's how that's allowing you to get to more in-game power, whatever. For Burley, it was really more about when you're performing at your best, your swing decisions are here. And here's the parts of the zone that you're most aggressive in because you do the most damage there. So again, it's the individualized product. And then it's the fun part of the actual partnering with the player, the conversation. And again, I think I can't say this enough. Like Ollie and Brownie are the ones like, I'm a helpful resource, but they're like in the trenches with the player, then actually building a plan, executing that plan, and assessing, adjusting how it goes behind the scenes. So while you might not have seen Burleson play that much, whenever that was, April, early May, in that range, he was grinding behind the scenes, and Brownie and the whole hitting group was really trying to push him towards the version that we've seen over the last month or so, where you are seeing like real improvements in some of the things we just talked about, like the swing rate, the correct swing rate, the just the swing decisions bucket, and being more aggressive to the parts of the zone that he can accentuate his superpower of contact and impact.
Kind of to that point on working behind the scenes, these guys, we don't see it. And you mentioned the Burley and the Gorman work. Jordan Walker's been doing the same thing behind the scenes when he's been healthy, working with Brant Brown. At what point, and I'm not just using Walker to single him out, but at what point does a conversation become hey, he's working behind the scenes? Do we keep him here? Does he benefit from going down? What are those conversations like? And at some point, is it, hey, going to the minor leagues doesn't help a player at all at this point in his career?
Yeah, those are certainly things that are talked about. Those are tough because there's no crystal ball on that, and sometimes you just have to make your best guess of, does this guy need more playing time? Does he need to see high velocity pitching to, like, can we stress test whatever it is the player's working on? Would it benefit him and us to stress test that under game conditions, or do we need to stress test that specifically in a major league environment? There's no black and white answer to that, and I think that's where you just want to lean on your group's experience and both the front office and the staff itself based on playing time. Like, there's so many factors that go into, well, how much playing time can we actually allocate to this guy given the other constraints of the roster? So a little bit more of like a gray area conversation, but those are certainly the things you try and weigh to come up with the best strategy.
This has been a lot of process talk on how the Cardinals can get guys to their best version of themselves at the major league level. I want to go kind of nerdy with you.
Sure.
Behind the scenes, what is it looking like on a day-to-day basis to be in a front office with Rob Surfolio, Chaim Bloom, John Mozeliak, and we're going to do that coming up on the other side here on the Redbird Report. Okay, I want to get a little bit nerdy with Rob Surfolio joining us here on the Redbird Report. I have had a lot of people ask me about some of the technology that you guys are doing right now, that you're using behind the scenes. So I don't know how far we can get into the weeds on this. I'm sure some of this is stuff that you guys would prefer not to share, and that's why organizations are successful at the major league level, right? But compared to when you first got here, how much has changed in the technology that is available for you to use, or the specific technologies that you are willing or able to use here in St. Louis? What does that look like for you day to day?
So a little bit of it's probably a twofold answer of how we're using some of the technology that already existed, and then the pathways to leverage new tools, both now and more importantly, long term. We talked about this a little bit. Baseball is a sport where you can quantify a lot of things.
Sure.
And that is, I think, an incredible advantage that we have in our sport comparatively to some of my friends that work in other sports. So capturing information on how guys are moving at high speeds under the conditions of competition is really important information. And you always don't get a one-to-one picture of that same thing if you were to capture it in a lab, in a markered setting where a pitcher's just throwing. There's no batter, there's no count, there's no umps, there's no 40,000 people.
For people that are at home listening right now, like Driveline would be an example of what you're talking about. Not to call them out on like a bad thing, but like that is something that we see behind the scenes.
Sure. What those guys do is phenomenal. The way in which they
100%.
go about their work, have sent a lot of players there and even hired people from Driveline because they go about it in an awesome way. But they're obviously not, when they put their live BPs out there on YouTube, there's no fans. They're trying to mimic competition to the best as they can, which is awesome. But we have the luxury of all the conditions are set to what we want that player to perform under. And so let's use that information to our advantage. And then let's connect the dots both with the people in baseball pants to the guys in the weight room, to the guys in the training room. And how do we leverage that information? So I think just probably just refreshing some of the ways in which we're now using some of that information just to allow our player plans to be really objective and eliminate guesswork, because the player deserves us to be dialed in on what we're working on and why, and for us to build awesome practice environments and programming to help them get better. So I think those are some of the examples. And there's obviously some things that we're looking to put in motion as well longer term that I'll probably just leave it at that.
Sure.
And I was going to ask you, like, I know you want to leave it at that. How much has changed in the first, whatever it's been, 6 months in terms of technology you've been able to implement since you've been hired by the St. Louis Cardinals?
Yeah, I would probably say 70-30 in terms of just leveraging some of 70 being leveraging some of the information that we already had that maybe we weren't actioning as scientifically or as specifically at scale. And then probably the smaller 30% would be new things that we've brought in going back to spring training, whether that's ways in which we're testing our athletes' readiness and strength power signals throughout the course of the year, whether that's certain things we did in spring training just to get like an assessment capture on who our players are, when they're moving at high speeds. So that's probably the 30%, and the 70% is probably just leveraging the information that the organization already had access to, just trying to put it more in like a player facing manner.
I know in like a soccer, for example, is very much in the forefront of like the training that is available for you on where are you at rest wise, right? Like how much, where are you at? Like if this is 100% capacity for you, where are you at on that scale from 1 to 100?
Yep.
Is that something that is being utilized as well for the Cardinals? And if so, how is that implemented for what you guys are doing?
Yeah, so I think, that would probably be something within that 30% of new things, whether it's, you roll into our AA affiliate, you'll see players doing force plate testing. You'll see them wearing devices that help actually track some of the both in-game, pre-game, probably workload's probably the best word to use. So that could be high-speed running. That could be total number of rotations. That could be a lot of different things. And then there's kind of the internal version of workload that's more player feedback in terms of like how they're feeling, how they slept. We can measure hydration, but they can also give us information on how hydrated they feel they are. So it really, in the performance realm, it's kind of using all of that information, just how ready and how primed is a guy to go out and perform at his peak. once you get multiple weeks, multiple days of testing information under your belt for a specific player, you kind of start to learn what their normative state is. And then you can use that information to, okay, this pitcher was supposed to throw 110 pitches. That was his max cap tonight. But, we saw some readiness things when it was on the table with the medical group, or some of his force plate jumping that might have us a little bit paused on that. So like, we're going to pull him back to 95 instead of 105, whatever it is, just small tweaks like that you don't ever know if that actually leads to better performance or durability or health. That at least that singular decision, but there's a lot of good information that if you do that over a long period of time, you're going to just stack the odds in your favor.
One thing I did want to ask you, and you keep mentioning there's a bunch of bullet points that you guys have bringing in all kinds of information, whether it be from player performance to the health side of the game, like we're just talking about there, trying to maximize keeping them healthy. AI is a big thing now. How is AI helping you guys, if at all? And if not now, what does the future look like maybe in Major League Baseball front offices with artificial intelligence?
Yeah, this is part of the, I'll probably only say so much part.
I appreciate you at least acknowledging as much.
At least I can be honest. At least on the day-to-day, probably not too dissimilar to how any company is using AI to help synthesize tasks, information, just make people more efficient. In our game, I think you need the human element. A robot can't tell you what to do with a player.
Yeah. No
matter how good of information you feed it, you can train that model to adapt and adjust over long periods of time. But ultimately, I think the way we're trying to leverage it now is just to use it to help synthesize information at scale quicker than what we'd have to do if all of us didn't have AI. And then long term, I think there's some interesting things that probably outside of the sports world that other like Fortune 500 companies, whether it's Silicon Valley or people working in tech spaces, that they're probably outpacing by a long shot where sports is on AI. And I think that's an interesting space to dig into.
We saw, and this is not digging into any like model that you guys have, but we saw in the early 2000s, I mean, Jeff Luhnow was somebody that was hired here in St. Louis. Michael Gersh came from outside of baseball to be a part of the Cardinals organization. Yep. There was this influx of outside of baseball people that became baseball people, or the new version of baseball people, right? Do you think that is something that we could see in the next 5, 10, 15 years with those people that you're talking about that are currently in Fortune 500 companies that are working with these AI models that could bring some of that to baseball?
Yeah, I think your best organizations are always looking to do that. And they're bringing people with zero baseball background, and they're combining forces with people that have been working in baseball for 40 years, and that's all they know. And if you have really great people in both versions of that profile, like, they will find a way to coexist and make each other better. I think that's what really great organizations across not just baseball, but the sports industry do well, is they bring in talented people and skill sets that can help make them better. And if you really have like your culture and the types of people that you think are great fits for that outlined and articulated, then it doesn't matter if someone comes to us, like a biomechanist comes to us from a prosthetics company and she has no baseball background in her entire life. If we do a really good job on the hiring front, that person can be a huge value add with people that have only worked for the St. Louis Cardinals for 30 years.
One quick follow-up on this. What has been in your history, whether that was with the Guardians or now here in St. Louis, you talked about like finding ways to find out where hydration levels are, or you're doing these tests prior to games, after games, whatever it might be. What's the player reaction to some of this? And I'm sure it's individualized, right? Like some players probably love every second of this and want to know all of the information. And others maybe are saying like, all right, listen, like I don't want to hear any of this. Just let me know if I'm ready to play or not.
Spot on.
What is that like for you guys? And how does that then allow you to individualize the plans for these players of being like, all right, this guy wants to know what his spin rate is on a curveball, and this guy just wants to know, like, am I spinning it the right way?
Yep.
What is that like for you guys as you utilize how they learn or how they want to hear this information and how you give it to them?
You ask them. I mean, it's as simple of an answer as that, but
Okay.
you ask the player,
Do
you
some not
partner
know?
with some don't know. Some, especially young players, sometimes they don't know. And that's the beautiful thing of the minor leagues is it gives you multiple years to learn that player.
Sure.
And we are always at, like, on the coaching side, we are always asking ourselves of what is the best way to achieve this outcome with this player. That might look really different for Matt Liberatore than it would Quinn Matthews. They both want information very differently, and it's on us to figure out how they want that information. And then we have to, whether it's a practice environment, we have to build that practice environment to achieve an outcome that's specific to how that player works best, or it's a post-game review. And we're going to sit down with either of those guys after a start. And what are we going to talk about and why? What you go into and the level of depth might be very different. I think it's more similar as guys get higher in levels. It's still individualized, but it's more specific to some of like the tip of the spear strategy, execution, velocity, pitch shape, delivery. Whereas when you're further away, you're working on like basic foundational skills and routines of asking guys, you know what, I actually don't care what happened in the game last night. Talk to me about your preparation and your routine to get ready. Like, let's grade that on a scale of 1 to 10 and like really partner with the player. But you're right in the sense that some guys want nothing. Some guys want everything. They want like the super slow motion of their open angle delivery and the edgertronic on how the ball spun out of their hand on pitch 35 last night.
Interesting.
It's very different to each player, and that's why you need an awesome staff that just essentially lives all the things that we're talking about. And again, I could give 20 plus people shout outs right now, whether it's major leagues or minor leagues, and actually bringing all of this to life at scale, because those guys are grinding in season. These games are late at night. They have families. They're tracking everything that's going on, and they're doing a really great job at making sure our players are informed.
I want to pivot towards, you mentioned when I asked you about AI and its future in baseball, and you said, hey, baseball still is human beings are in the game. It's still about a feel thing. So I want to go towards catching prospects, for example. One thing that is a feel thing that Ali Marmol has told us about and raves about Pedro Pages is his game calling ability.
Yep.
Because you guys can come up with the script of, hey, here's how we approach it, but there's also a time to deviate from that script, whether that is pitcher doesn't have his best curveball today, and that may be what is called for in this specific count. What goes into that at the minor league level of working on game calling and preparation with catchers behind home plate and working with pitching staffs? Because you guys have got Jimmy Crooks at AAA, Bernal at AA, who are some of your top prospects according to websites to us and the public. What is that process like?
We're knee deep in that process, first off, which is awesome. Just to what we talked about even early on is Cardinals have developed a lot of really great catchers over the course of their organization. That's an obvious fact. Myself and other people come from different organizations. We kind of like, well, what have we been doing to coach and teach this? And what do we want our new version of that story to look like? So even, talking with Ollie about this, even within the last month, of how do we ensure that, like guys you just mentioned, Jimmy Crooks, Leo Bernal, other younger players that are further away, by the time they get up here, they're able to not only do what's asked of them, but excel at what's asked of them, like Petey can do with how he goes about his preparation and his knowledge of each and every pitcher's strengths. And that's really where it starts. It's what are the base rates of what are effective pitches to each handed hitter? What are the counts where they play most effectively, and like basic game theory understanding for our catchers. And then if I'm the catcher and each of you guys are my pitchers, how you get outs is going to be really different than how you get outs. And that's just like the individual nature of every pitcher's arsenal. And then you need to leverage the base rates and make them specific to the actual pitcher that you're then game calling for. And then there's the fun part of like the in-game adjustments of, okay, it feels like these guys came out and for whatever reason their approach was they were going to be on this guy's slider tonight. And that might be his best pitch right on right. And you might deviate off that because there's real information that suggests that that's what the team is looking, that's what their game strategy was in the opposite direction. So I think you can't get to that part that Pedro does really well without being really awesome at some of those foundational elements of right on right, what tends to beat right-handed hitters. And then when you're facing a right-handed hitter, you, the pitcher, what's your story of that? And then you have to like practice that a bunch. We have to build, I'll use the feedback loop thing again. We have to build tight feedback loops so that the next day our coaches and players get together and like after action review exactly what happened and have, as long as there's rationale and it's evidence-based with some feel around it of like, here's why I adjusted here. Awesome. But we want to stack the deck in our favors before the guy starts his windup. And we can do that by being really crystal clear on what is this pitcher's strengths? How does he tend to get guys out most effectively? And then what are the base rates that just, you're trying to add like a poker hand. You're just trying to add odds in your favor to win that specific pitch and ultimately the at bat.
You mentioned a couple of the minor league prospects that you have currently in the system there. I want to talk about a few others as well, whether that be Tink Hence. Josh Baez has had a really impressive season. It feels like maybe Chase Davis has figured something out at the minor league level as well. I want to get into some of those coming up on the other side here on the Redbird Report. All right, I want to get into a few of the specific minor league players and on the development side, what we're seeing from them this year, because it's been a good year for the Cardinals on that side of things. We talked with John Mozeliak yesterday on the show, and he mentioned, especially on the pitching side, some of the things that you guys have been able to do. One of the Cardinals pitchers that fans have been excited about for a few years now is Tink Hence. He has come back to the minor league level. He's finally back on the field now. What have you seen this year from him on the development side? What gets you guys excited about it?
He's an athlete. So, and Tink's actually articulated this recently publicly, which has been cool because it's been a lot of just our initial work with him. So, obviously he was in Major League camp, spring training. He was healthy then, had a very minor injury. But really for us, it was more about just getting him fully healthy, but really getting him back to the best version of him. And we did a bunch of homework on what that was going all the way back to 2022, 2023, when this guy, forget about like his ERA and the actual performance at whatever level he was at. It was really about how he was moving and what was coming out of his hand. And we can use that information to help make a projection on how well does that project at the highest levels. And so, like we've talked about a bunch today, it was using all of our information. It was building in evidence-based targets. It was built around when Tink Hence is at his best, like what are his superpowers and where are opportunities for realistic development around that. And I think with Tink, there was a lot of like movement-oriented things within his delivery of finding the sweet spot for when he loads over the rubber and moves down slope and he starts rotating towards the catcher, like where is he in space from an extension release height side of things, and how do we work up the chain for like, well, what happened when he got into his legs and started moving at high speeds? What did we see here versus there? And so trying to then bring those two things together into like an actual set of player plan, programming, et cetera. Our pitching group, everyone from our farm director, Larry Day, to Matt Pierpont, Austin Miney, and Rick Harrigan are guys that are like, we're with him every day in Florida. Our rehab group deserves a ton of credit for their work getting him full health. And then Tink was bought in. He was like, I've been a really successful pitcher before, and I want to get back to that. And so then it was like we've talked about, getting around a round table like this, working through all the information and being honest with Tink of, here's where we're going to try and go. And that's why we're going to do some of these things, whether it's his plyo care routine, some of the delivery work we were doing with him. And hopefully that continues to just allow him to have success, regardless of what level he's at moving forward.
And what have you guys seen from Takeo Roby? He started the year at AA, pitched well, and then just a couple weeks ago, you guys decided to promote him up to AAA in Memphis. What have you guys seen from his development this year?
He's been a real treat to work with. We talked about guys that some guys want just very little information. Some guys want all of it. He's very much towards he wants all of it. He wants to know. And those players are oftentimes really fun and maybe even sometimes a little bit dangerous because they want too much. So you have to thread the needle on that. But I think TK, just from a starting point, like he's a big physical righty that throws hard and can create multiple pitch shapes that work in his advantage. So if we have 100 of those guys, we're going to be probably just fine. But it was on the margins. Now, again, what is when he excels, what's happening, and what are the things that we see from a performance and expected performance standpoint that we can add to his game to give him just better opportunities against higher level hitters. So we've done a couple things with TK, whether it's the little bit of the lateral sinker add or kind of flipping his changeup grip to some of like the kick change steam that that's now become like a public thing. But really, it wasn't about the kick change. It's how do we make his changeup like kill spin and lose depth or create depth. And then try and accentuate some of his best pitches with his four seam that creates really good velocity in late life. And then his slider curveball, like he can really spin the baseball, which gives him options for both righties and lefties. So it's just trying to make sure that we are harnessing the things that he does really well and then trying to find some small wins on the margins to make his arsenal more complete to handle the best hitters in the world, both righties and lefties. And then when he went up to AAA, like there's this adaptation to guys using the major league ball really for the first time that he's been working through. And, I've seen this in going back to my time in Cleveland, of just that being like a multi-game learning effect for guys to really get comfortable with all their pitch grips, because the ball is actually a little bit different in terms of the actual feel. And just trying to, that's one of the fun things about when guys go up. They have that opportunity to try and make that adjustment in both what they're doing in the bullpen and then obviously in game. But TK has been really fun, and both him and a lot of our group deserves a lot of credit for just some of the improvements he's made so far in 2025.
I would imagine, could be wrong on this, I would imagine Quinn Matthews is another one of those guys that wants a lot of information coming his way. It's been a different year for him this year than it was last year, right? And this is sometimes a good thing where guys hit a bit of a roadblock and they can learn about themselves. What's working, what's not working, how do I get to that next level? So as you've been going through this with Quinn Matthews this season, what have you learned about him that can get him to this next level?
Yeah, well, first off, he's sitting right here next to us. We'd be talking about the exact same thing of like, what a great opportunity this is that you get to learn and adapt to failure, not in the major leagues.
Sure.
It is really hard when guys go up to the major leagues and they've never failed. They've just been the best player in every team they've ever had, and performance has come easy. The opportunity that it creates for Quinn in this case to, like, development is not linear. It's not just we did this thing and all of a sudden it's, sunshine and rainbows out there. Like, he is going through the learning adaptation of the Major League Baseball, the having to face better hitters, the coming back from like a little bit of a very minor back tweak in spring training, but then using that time to try and get his best delivery pattern to show up most frequently. And so like for him, like what a great opportunity that is, that you are working through this now so that by the time you get to the major leagues, and guess what? When he gets to the major leagues, there's going to be a month of time where he's probably not very good, and he's going to have this to lean back on, both mentally, but then also what are the things he did to get himself ready to go. I think it's an awesome opportunity, and to Quinn's credit, like, he is a awesome competitor. I love watching how he goes about his preparation and his in-game competitiveness, and now just trying to use that in the right manner each and every day when you don't have results going in your way, and trying to really keep yourself stubborn to a long-term process and holding yourself accountable to working on the things that we think are going to allow him to have success in the big leagues.
I want to deviate real quick away from just specific players and focus on a pitching development question overall. When we talk about pitchers, you mentioned like when they get to the big leagues, they might have that moment where they struggle. We've seen Matthew Liberatore went through that when he first got here. Yep. He was a guy that also went to the bullpen and learned, kind of fine-tuned his craft, and then moved to a starter. We saw way back in 2011, Lance Lynn did that when he was a prospect, started in the bullpen, and then I think it was the next year became a starter. But there's also guys like Michael McGreevy who don't go to the bullpen. They just kind of come up and they start, and then that's how they run with it. Is there something to where a pitcher can, from gaining an opportunity by starting in the bullpen and learning at the major league level before potentially moving into that rotation?
There's certainly examples of that I've seen. We have people that you just brought up. I've seen that, like a name that my time in Cleveland jumps out, Carlos Carrasco, who was like in the running for multiple Cy Youngs, came up, was humbled as a starter, went to the bullpen, really kind of found his form, and then did that over a starter workload for a long time. So I think there's certainly examples of that. I think it just comes down to the player, and there's certain information of just what does your team need at that point. But there's a lot of real learning that goes on in the bullpen of what part of my routine actually matters. Like I only now, instead of having 4 hours to get ready for a game, I've got 4 minutes when the bullpen phone just rang. So like what parts of my routine would I take a bullet for? Sometimes it helps like simplify what players do in their day when they're not like actually pitching in game. So there are times where I've seen that be impactful, but I think it ultimately just comes down to the player.
On the position player side of things, you guys have a few guys that are very exciting down at the minor league level right now. Let's start out with a couple that have been in the system for a while. Similar, I would suppose, profiles, but different in terms of how they've come here. Josh Baez was a high school kid, big upside whenever he was drafted. Chase Davis coming from the college level, but also big upside whenever he was drafted. What have you seen from both of them development-wise this year? How have they been able to come into so much success?
Yeah, so we just talked about the routine part. Their routine and their training has really become a strength of theirs. And when I say that, that's obviously how they go about their work, but it's also our staff coming really prepared into those training opportunities to like, this is what this player needs. So those 5 guys over in cage 3 might be working on this, but we're going to use cage 1 to really help each of their individual probably their biggest areas of needed improvement would be the way to say it. So JB is, like you talked about, a high school kid, Northeast high school kid that sometimes people sour on these guys because they join the organization when they're 18. The guy's still 21 in AA. He might have been here for 4 or 5 years, but globally, he's still a really young player that has tools that are hard to teach. When you think about speed, both running and bat speed, and just like his ability to throw the baseball. So like, what can we do to help, again, amplify the thing that he does really well, which is impact the baseball, and then bias his training towards the things that he needs to make the biggest improvements on, which is swinging at the right pitches and making contact consistently. So we can train both those skills, and we need to build practice plans that are designed to helping our guys move the needle on that. And so what JB does pregame is different than what JJ does pregame. They're working towards the same outcome of major league impact, but focused on very different things. It would almost be like in a hospital, you have patients diagnosed with different things. You want all of them to be discharged healthy. That's the outcome, but like what they did was very different. So when you think about the guys you mentioned with Chase and JB, it's really just trying to like, what do they do really well? And then how do we build objective evidence-based training that is designed to help address the areas that they need the most help in.
I want to ask you about JJ Weatherholt. I remember talking to you in, I think it was early April, right after opening day, and I asked you about the decision to put him in AA, and you said, hey, sure, we want to push him, right? We want to just push and see where he's at. He's doing pretty good down in AA. His numbers look really good. What have you guys seen from him, and do you think that there could maybe be a promotion coming in the near future for him to AAA?
Yeah, I mean, it's something we've talked about a lot. First-year player, going back to our conversation in April, of just our best guess was that his skill set, and I think one of the fun like micro stories of his years, I think he started like 0 for 25, or whatever it was, something like that. And if you were to have watched those games, you wouldn't have known if he was 25 for 25 or 0 for 25, which speaks a ton to just the maturity that he has and just the confidence he has in his skill set, which I've really enjoyed just seeing it as I gotten to know and work with JJ more. That's really stood out. So I think the level has done what we hoped it would have done, and JJ has responded to the level in the way that we would have hoped as well, going from slow start to gaining steam and confidence. And then you look at his last month, he's really been one of the best players in all of AA, regardless of what league you look at, and whether that's actual numbers on a scoreboard or expected numbers behind the scene, he's doing a lot well, and his process and maturity and how he's getting to that performance is maybe the more even impressive aspect.
All right, we've got a couple of minutes left here. Who is somebody at both the minor league level and the major league level that, with what you guys have been doing behind the scenes on the development side of things, you're excited about what could come in the second half of the season for them? A pitcher, position player, whatever it might be, but somebody at the major league level that you're excited about, and somebody at the minor league level that you're excited about for the second half this year.
Yeah, we've kind of talked about a couple of them, so I hope it's okay that I go back to some previous names. But I think, and again, Brownie deserves a huge amount of credit for both the Nolan Gorman story, the Burley stories. Like, those guys' work behind the scenes has gotten them to improve performance. Some of the things that Donnie's been doing behind the scenes of speed and putting the ball in plays to kind of like maximize a part of his player performance that wasn't as big of it has been this year. On the pitching side up top, there's multiple guys. I mean, several of our major league starters are on the margins working on like pitch shape, execution strategy. You saw a lot of that with Libby, especially early, just where he kind of went through he had just evolved into a completely different strategy from the types of pitches he was throwing to each side just to help him have better results. So those are a couple names right there. I think on the minor league side, Tink Hence would have been a name I said. And part of that goes to just the rehab, everything we did in the rehab segment with him to get his body not just healthy, but moving on mound in the way that we think he's going to have the most success. A name that I brought up actually going all the way back to April, who he had a really good start to the year, had a little bit of an ankle tweak. Bryson Motts is a really interesting lefty at the AA level that I think just continues to get better and better and better as we go. And the angles he creates both over the rubber and over the plate make him really unique. And then I think Chenway would be the other guy that started injured. We wanted to be just as smart as we could with getting him healthy and getting him back to the best version of him. In the last month, some of the things he's doing from an Arsenal perspective is pretty special. So we got a bunch of other guys I think that jump to mind with some arms in low A, like Burns and Worley and some of these guys that are like names that are like way further down probably the average fan's prospect list, but just guys that continue to get better and are working towards the things that we outlined for them.
Is there anything, I always like asking this question at the end, is there anything that we didn't ask you about that you feel like fans need to know, whether that be about where the organization is at, what you do day to day, what the player development system looks like right now, individual players that they should know about? Is there any one thing that you're like, you know what, this is something that if I was a Cardinals fan and I didn't get my glimpse into the behind the scenes, I think they should know, and maybe they don't know it right now?
Yeah. Maybe two things. The first one would be major league oriented. We talked about like just Ollie and his groups daily work to push our players to get better, and how rare that actually is at times at the highest level of the major leagues, especially with like veteran teams. We have our players and we're going to go play 162 and guys are going to get ready in whatever way they want. I think just the culture that they're creating down there of like, we are going to care about all three phases of hitting, pitching, base running, defense. And we're going to excel at those, and we're going to coach and train towards getting better in all of those. And that helps when you have a young team that's really hungry for that, or youngry if you believe the Victor Scott slogan. So I think that would be one. And then I think the other one is just like on the minor league side would just be the collaboration between the guys that are wearing baseball pants at 7:00 and the performance staff, and how they are really working in unison to build better, bigger, faster, stronger baseball players. And I say baseball players, not athletes, because we're not trying to win a weightlifting competition or a who can run the fastest 40-yard dash competition. Baseball is very much of a skill-based sport, and that requires both those groups to really be on the same sheet of music of what this specific player is working towards. Like, what do we want to see from him on the baseball side on field? And what is all of our jobs to help bring that to life, whether he's lifting at 10:30 a.m. or whether he's in his early work session at 3:00 with the hitting coach.
Well, Rob, this has been an absolute pleasure. I think Cardinals fans have been able to get a little bit of a glimpse into what the development side of things looks like.
To sleep.
No. It's been great. We appreciate you hopping on with us today. Hopefully we'll be able to do this again, maybe at the end of the season, to kind of take a look back at what took place with the Cardinals throughout this season. So thanks for hopping on with us. We wish you guys nothing but the best of the rest of the way, and hopefully we'll talk with you again soon.
Yeah, love being here. I appreciate you guys having me on, and I hope the second half is just as fun as the first half's been so far.
That is Rob Surfolio. If you guys have missed any of our previous episodes, it's all available for you. YouTube.com/101 ESPN STL. For Tanner Hendrickson and Zane, who does a fantastic job for us on the video side of things, I'm Brandon Kiley. We'll talk to you guys next week on the Redbird Report.
Find every episode of the Redbird Report with Brandon Kiley and Tanner Hendrickson on YouTube or at 101ESPN.com.